Friends, this is Vijay Shukla welcoming you to the session on stakeholder analysis. As a business analyst on the project, your task and your job is all about requirements. Business requirements, requirements of stakeholders, solution requirements which are functional and non-functional, and transition requirements. Whom do you engage to get onto the detail of these requirements? You see, it is the stakeholder. So, stakeholder analysis and stakeholder management is a very important area of study and application for IT business analysts. I will take you to the agenda of this session, which includes stakeholder definition, importance of a stakeholder, stakeholder identification and techniques, stakeholder classification, stakeholder engagement techniques. Then we will take up an IRCTC case study on stakeholder identification. We will further take up stakeholder examples for higher education and management system. And then finally we will summarize our session. Stakeholder definition. You may agree with me on the following line. A project sponsor has a huge stake in the success of the project. So nothing extraordinary about it. Someone who is a project sponsor will obviously want the project and initiative to succeed. In fact, the project sponsor is one of the most important stakeholders on the project. So who actually a stakeholder is? A stakeholder is a person, a group of persons or an organization who has direct or indirect stake in the outcome of the project or the proposed solution. Stakeholder importance. You see, a project is for its stakeholders, and for a project to succeed, it has to meet the needs of its stakeholders. As a business analyst on the job and as a business analyst who is conducting the requirements phase, you must ensure that you identify all your stakeholders, important stakeholders, early on in the project. Not only you identify them, you initiate some kind of dialogue or some kind of communication with them as early as possible. You see, as a business analyst for the last decade and a half or so, I have learned few things that I'll share with you out here on the area of stakeholder analysis. I have worked with clients or stakeholders from countries like Japan to countries like United States of America. One thing remains the same and one thing is common to all the projects. That is, stakeholders are your partners who control the purse strings and certify successful project completion. So, stakeholders on the project are not adversaries. So, if they share a requirement or if they share a process that is contrary to what you may think as an easy route or as an obvious route, you must try to understand their point of view and their perspective. This is one thing. Second thing is, they are the ones who control the purse strings. The project has been initiated by the project sponsor with some vision in mind. You are on the job and your company, that is the development company, is on the job for this project. So, their happiness and their satisfaction is important, and only when they are satisfied that project milestones are being reached, they will loosen their purse strings or they will make the payments as we have agreed upon. And they are also the ones who certify project completion. As a business analyst, you cannot say that look, the project has met all its objectives and the project is successful. No, it is the stakeholders, their satisfaction and their certification is must. Another thing which I will share with you out of my experience, that for project success, good relationship and rapport with your stakeholders is necessary but not a sufficient condition. You see, when the project starts, a business analyst is darling of everyone's eye and he is the center of all the attraction. So the stakeholders who would have committed $1 million or so for their projects, they treat you well. They treat you like royalty. You are the one on the project. So they go an extra mile to build good rapport and good relationship. This is something like a honeymoon period on the project. It is good, it is necessary, but it is never sufficient. You must keep an eye on the timelines and deliverables which has been promised between the development team and the client, and to have a long running success on the project, not only you should maintain a good relationship, but also you should maintain the promises which have been made to the client or to the stakeholders. Stakeholder identification. Having understood who our stakeholders are and their importance for the success of the project, let us try to identify them. One simple method to identify the stakeholders for your project is to identify the stakeholders at the process level. That is, if your project has got several processes, you can identify who are the individuals who are affected by this process. Then stakeholders at the project level, that is, if you have a project coordinator, if you have a project champion and other roles like this, so they are the stakeholders at the project level. Then stakeholders at the enterprise level. You see, at the enterprise level, there are stakeholders like Chief Marketing Officer, or let us say if you are implementing a human resource information system, the Chief of the Human Resources will be the person who may be interested at the project level also, but let us say the Chief Executive Officer is someone who is interested in the project or who is the stakeholder of the project at the enterprise level. Then there are stakeholders at the industry level. Even your competitors are your stakeholders, or maybe suppliers who are supplying some information or who are supplying some service with the solution which is having an interface with the solution is a stakeholder. Then there are government regulators and tax authorities who are stakeholders to the project. Stakeholder onion diagram is an effective method to identify your stakeholders. The stakeholder onion diagram has got at its innermost core the solution delivery or the solution delivery team. Everyone who is affected or who is involved in solution delivery, whether from the development team or from the client, is identified here. So project team and others directly involved with the creation of the solution. Here I will clarify that even the development team, the testers, the implementers, business analyst himself is a stakeholder on the project. Then after the innermost core of solution delivery comes the affected organization unit. That is the organization unit for which you are implementing the solution. So here end users, help desk and others who are in the department who will get affected by this change. Then it is the organization or enterprise. So those who are at the organization level, example sponsors, executives, domain level subject matter experts and other affected groups are the stakeholders at the organization or enterprise level. Then finally the outermost layer or outermost peel of this onion is the affected external stakeholders. Many projects have got external stakeholders as well. So let us say your solution has to share this information with some regulatory agency. So your reports, when they will come out of the solution, they will go to the regulator. So the regulator is the affected external stakeholder for the project. The business analyst body of knowledge has also listed certain stakeholders on a project. So this list will help you identify them. They include business analyst, who is also known as business systems analyst or systems analyst or process analyst or consultant or a product owner. Then the customer or the client, the end user, the implementation subject matter expert, the domain subject matter expert, operational support, project manager, supplier, tester, regulator, sponsor. So this is the list of stakeholders listed in Business Analyst Body of Knowledge, BABOK version 2.0. Now let us learn about stakeholder wheel. Stakeholder wheel is yet another technique or visual through which you can identify your stakeholders. So if you see the stakeholders field, we have customers as stakeholders, our partners as stakeholders. So say for example, let us say you are delivering an IT solution. Included in this IT solution is a functionality of sending short messages or SMS as we call them. And we are taking this SMS service from a third party vendor. So this third party vendor, who is our partner, is also a stakeholder. Suppliers are stakeholders, then government regulators are stakeholders, employees both from the development team and the client organization are stakeholders, managers are the stakeholders on this project, owners, and even competitors are stakeholders of the project because they also get affected by the outcome of your project. On the left, as you can see, I have just put down the list where it is one and the same thing. Client as a stakeholder, client's client. This is an important observation. Many a times you see your client's client is the one who is going to use the application. So let us say if you are making an internet-based solution for a banking system, it is the client's client or the account holder who will use the system. So he is also a stakeholder. So you must keep him in mind as well. Management, investors, government, regulator, tax authorities. So many of the systems where there are you see financial implications, tax authorities are also stakeholders. So say for example for a banking system, if there is a service of rupees 100, let us say for issue of a new debit card, it is under the ambit of service tax in India. So 12.36% service tax has to be charged on this service. So tax authorities are also a stakeholder to your system. Then there is yet another stakeholder in some industries who is known as an ombudsman. And ombudsman is a neutral adjudicator in the industry who protects the interests of all the stakeholders, especially the client. You would have heard about the banking ombudsman, or you would have heard about the ombudsman in the insurance industry. So far we have covered stakeholder definition, importance, and identification. Having identified the stakeholders, now comes the stakeholder classification. You see, engagement and management of stakeholders is very important to the success of your projects. So you need to classify them, and then according to the classification, you will apply different engagement techniques. So you can classify the stakeholders on the basis of their current attitude. So here you see we classify the stakeholders as a champion. A champion is someone who actively works for the success of the project. Every project needs a project champion. And in fact, if I remember my experience as a business analyst on the project, none of the projects on which I have worked would have been successful without the project champion. So a champion is normally from the client. He is a very energetic and enthusiastic person for implementation of the project. He is, if not tech savvy, but at least very much application savvy. And he is your very highly vocal supporter. Then there is a supporter. Supporter is in the favor of the project, but he is not as active or as enthusiastic or as open in supporting your project compared to the project champion. In fact, the supporter will not have the equal amount of, the specialization in the project. Then neutral, those who have no expressed opinion, neither for the project nor against the project. Then there is a critic. Critic is not in the favor of project, however he is not very active in opposing the project. Then opponent. Opponent is someone on the project or some stakeholder who works actively to disrupt the project and to derail the project and to impede the project. Then there are someone who are known as blockers. Blockers just obstruct the progress, maybe for reasons outside the project itself. Yet another method to classify our stakeholders on the project on the basis of the power which they wield, the support which they provide to the project, the influence which they have within their organizations, and their need for the solution. So power can be high, medium or low. So say for example, someone like a data entry operator will have a low power. Someone who is a departmental head or who is head of the organization will have a very high power. Support can be positive, neutral or negative. It depends on the attitude of the person. Then influence, whether that person can influence the project highly or he doesn't have that kind of influence. Then need or utilization of the project. So strong, medium or weak. So say for example, let us say you are implementing a customer relationship management solution in a company. So need to the marketing department and to the marketing head will be very high or very strong. Compared to, let us say, head of the HR will have a weak need for the same solution. So taking this example where we implement a customer relationship management solution, head of HR as a stakeholder will have a high power. His support, we can't say it will happen on the project. His influence, if he is active in the project, his influence will be high. Otherwise, if he is not interested in the project, his influence is low. His need for the project is weak. So this is an example how we can classify our stakeholders on the basis of these 4 parameters, that is power, support, influence and need. Now when we have classified our stakeholders on the basis of power, support, influence and need, now comes the time to engage with these stakeholders through a predetermined strategy. That strategy is stakeholder matrix. Have a look at the stakeholder matrix. On the y-axis is the influence of a stakeholder, which is high or low, and on the x-axis is the impact on a stakeholder, which is again low or high. So on this classification you can see there are 4 rectangular boxes, and on the top left is the box which is high and low. That is, influence is high but the impact on the stakeholder for the solution is low. Coming back to our original example where we are implementing a CRM system in a company, and this CRM system is to be utilized by the marketing department, the head of the HR is one stakeholder whose influence is high, but his impact on him by the implementation of this solution is low. So to engage a stakeholder like this is basically we need to ensure that the stakeholder remains satisfied. He is, or rather you are in his good books. Another stakeholder who's on the top right can be someone who has got a high influence and who has got a high impact on him for the project. So say for example, he can be the chief marketing officer. So the solution is being implemented in his department and he is also a person who is having high influence or high power. So for a stakeholder like this, you have to work closely with him and you have to ensure that he is in agreement with you and he supports the change wholeheartedly. Then coming on the bottom box on the left, where the influence of a stakeholder is low and also impact on him is low. So say for example, some section officer in the HR department. So you need to monitor to ensure that this stakeholder's interest or influence do not change. Just in case it changes, then you need to provide attention to him. And then there can be a set of stakeholders who have low influence but they have a high impact on them. So say for example, data entry operators or end users in the marketing department. So you keep them informed so that they have a low level of anxiety for the change. They can be concerned because you see some changes happening and they also feel that they have lack of control. So your duty as a business analyst is to keep them informed. On the same lines, you can have a look at this grid which has been proposed by Paul, Yeates and Cadle in their book Business Analysis. So on the x-axis is interest and on the y-axis is power or influence. So on the y-axis there is no power, some power and high power, and on the x-axis there is no interest, some interest and high interest. So if we make the grid lines, we come up with 9 rectangles, and for each of these rectangles, or in whichever rectangle the stakeholder falls in, they have provided an appropriate stakeholder engagement tactics. You can have a look at it and you can apply the same example of a CRM solution being implemented in the company, and you can come up with your list of stakeholders and whom to engage in which manner. If you see this grid, the author of this technique has identified several stakeholders. They include project sponsor, senior user, business actor or the user, then the project manager, business analyst and the domain expert. And on the vertical side, there are several activities. So say for example, for business case. For business case, he has mentioned that project sponsor is accountable. So accountability for the business case or why the project is to be initiated lies with the project sponsor. And you see here, the business analyst is to be consulted for the business case. The project manager is responsible. Then for the project initiation document, again for the project initiation document, the project sponsor is accountable and the project manager is responsible. For interview notes, so for interview notes, definitely for the interview process you will not involve project sponsor all the time. So for interview notes, the project sponsor is to be informed, the business analyst is responsible, the project manager is accountable, and other users are to be consulted for the interview. Then notes from the workshops. Again you see the project sponsor is to be informed, the business analyst is responsible, and for all these items you see the author has put project manager as accountable. Similarly for areas like requirements catalog, which is the requirements database, for use case diagram, for class diagram, for use case descriptions, everywhere the business analyst is responsible, the project manager is accountable, the project sponsor is to be informed, and the senior user, the subject matter expert, etc. are to be consulted. So this is how you engage your stakeholders on the basis of RACI chart technique. Just have a look at this visual. So here we have identified the stakeholders of a higher education management system. They include student and parent. Of course, if you are going to implement a higher education management system which may include student administration, e-learning, fee payment, etc., student and parents are the stakeholders. Also the teaching staff who may have role in student administration, may be sharing the lecture notes, may be providing the attendance and all. Then the non-teaching staff, say someone who collects the fees. The administration who is basically checking all the time the performance parameters of the educational institution. Then management like registrar, controller of exam, vice chancellor, etc. Then regulatory agency. So say for example, for technical education we have this regulatory agency, All India Council of Technical Education, or regulatory agency for medical education like Medical Council of India. Then also government and government departments. So say for example, if there is a scholarship dispersal from the government department which disburses scholarships to certain set of students, so that department is also a stakeholder. So here I will discuss some general guidelines on stakeholder engagement. First and foremost is early identification of stakeholders. Then you should proactively get introduced to them, elicit and validate requirements from them, and even when you are done with the requirements process or requirements activity, do a follow-up with them and you remain connected with them, because you will need these stakeholders time and again. You may need them at the analysis phase, during the time of test management and execution and project implementation, again you will need them. So you try to remain connected with them. You have to maintain a professional approach with your stakeholders. Also, you need to build rapport and relationships. That is also important. It is not harmful to interact with them outside work environment and discuss outside work topics. You see, as a business analyst, you may be working with them on a longer period, say 6 months or 12 months on a project. So, no harm in that. Gift, pamper your stakeholders within acceptable ethical and corporate norms. You see, everyone likes special attention. Your stakeholders are no exception. So, according to the norms of your company, you can gift them, you can pamper them. Greetings on festivals, birthdays, congratulatory notes on corporate milestones are yet another way and a good way to remain connected with your stakeholders. Now we will take up a case study of IRCTC passenger ticketing system. Here you have to identify the stakeholders of the system. What I will suggest that you log on to the World Wide Web and go to the IRCTC website, which is www.irctc.co.in. Have a look at this website and you try to identify all the stakeholders of this solution. I will share their list in a while. You can pause this lecture here, identify the stakeholders, and then you can again restart this lecture, and on the next slide I have shared with you the set of stakeholders who are identified with this solution. I believe that you have given some time to pause this video and have visited the website of IRCTC and identified these stakeholders by now. I will also share my list with you. You can compare it with your set of stakeholders. So first stakeholder is the Indian Railways, basically the department or the ministry for which IRCTC is running this website. So IRCTC is selling tickets through its online web application for the Indian Railways. Then second stakeholder is IRCTC itself, the Indian Railway Catering and Tourism Corporation. Then the passengers who avail the service and who sometimes buy the tickets through the agents or sometimes they buy the ticket themselves. Then the travel agents. You see there is a separate login for travel agents. So travel agents are also the stakeholders. Credit card companies and the banking companies. You see there are payment gateways. Credit card payment gateway, then debit card payment gateways and so on. Then SMS gateway companies. When you book a ticket you receive an SMS from the SMS vendor. Then mobile companies. You can see PayMate, NGPay, Item are the mobile companies who are the stakeholders for this solution. Then tax authorities. You see there is a certain amount of service tax which is being levied on the ticket. So service tax department is also a stakeholder. Then solution providers like Broadvision, CRIS, VeriSign, MasterCard Secure Code, they are also the stakeholders. Then advertisers, those who are advertising on this site. So this is the broad set of stakeholders for this solution. Now we have come to the end of this session on stakeholder analysis and engagement. So to summarize, we must remember that the project or the solution is for its stakeholders. As business analysts, we need to identify them early and we need to engage them continuously on the basis of classification. We must get introduced to them. We must meet and communicate with them frequently. We need to build a rapport so that it makes our own lives easy and our own projects successful. We need to understand them and we need to deliver their key requirements. And if we do all these things in a determined manner, there is no other outcome but as a business analyst you will be leading your project to success.